Well, Oklahoma and the fan base, everybody knew that last week was going to be arguably the toughest week of the season. Two top 15 teams, one of them on the road, the other one being Kansas, a team that Oklahoma has not had a ton of success against. It was going to be a tough week. It was always going to be a tough week. We knew that before the season, and it turned out to be a tough week, Brody. Oklahoma back-to-back losses. Tuesday, a blowout loss against Baylor, and then a loss against Kansas on Saturday that they actually led by double digits in the first half, but just ran out of gas in the second half. We are going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about the stretch run for OU basketball season and so much more. This is another episode of In the Paint, a basketball video series fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I am joined as always by Brody Lusk, who does some basketball coverage for us, some recruiting stuff, everything OU basketball. Brody, we knew last week was going to be hard, as I said, but and I think we knew that beating Kansas, it was going to be a long shot for Oklahoma, but is losing it the way they did, losing it by 10 after having an 11-point lead in the first half, does that add to does that make it more frustrating that was a game OU could have won?
It 100% does because Kansas, they didn't play very well at all. And so I think that just the fact that they didn't play well in Oklahoma, despite being without two of their better players in Rivaldo Soares and John Hughley, had a pretty solid chance to win that game. I mean, you mentioned being up by double digits, and they just kind of folded down the stretch of the game, which we've seen multiple times this season.
Yeah, and to me, man, I'm looking at like you mentioned, it's Porter Moser didn't use it as an excuse, but they were without Rivaldo and John, and Rivaldo has arguably, I don't even know how arguable it's been. He's been their best player in the Big
Mm-hmm.
12 play. He just has been,
Yeah.
not having him hurt. But to me, my two takeaways from that second half where they ran out of gas, they looked exhausted. Being in the arena, they looked exhausted. But two, they only made four shots in the second half. They went 4 of 22, right? I think they went 4 of 22.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was a microcosm again. And I feel like I've used that word time and time again. It's especially without Soares, they couldn't find scoring, man. Otega Owe, 1 of 7. He's now shooting 37% in conference play. Or 30, actually, I think it's 34% in conference play. JV McCollum, another single digit game for him. He's shooting 37% in conference play. And Los Uzan, who was pretty good in the first half, missed all 5 of his shots in the second half. He went 3 of 12. It doesn't matter who you're playing. If those three guys just aren't giving you much and aren't shooting efficiently, which they really haven't been, all three of those guys are shooting under 40% in conference play. I don't, Brody, I don't want to bag on them too hard. The Big 12 is really hard. Last week was a really tough week, but Brody, isn't there something simple to just, they need to play better? They just got to play better. They can't have, that
Yeah.
can't happen.
Yeah, I think it's really that simple. And it's just like you mentioned, Los. I mean, he came and I think he had two 3-pointers in the first half, so he
Mhm.
came out hot. And then in the second half, I mean, he just missed a ton of bunnies. You think about the one at the end of the first half, which that I mean that was brutal in that game because you're up by I think you mentioned 11, but then you go into half only up by 5 when Kansas
Yeah.
had played terribly. So to me, I mean, you're like if you're Kansas in that situation after that first half that they had to only be down 5, that was when it was just kind of like, okay, it just feels like Oklahoma's going to fold down the stretch. And the down low play, I don't Sam Godwin and Luke Northweather, neither of them grabbed a defensive rebound,
I know.
which is just like, I mean, you're not going to win many games if you're bigs. And I get that, neither of them are the best rebounder on the team. I'd say that's Jalen Moore, but your two centers should be able to grab some rebounds. I don't care if it's Hunter Dickinson down there. So, Jalen Moore, I thought he showed up and he played fairly well. Second half, he didn't really do much, but then again, nobody did. So, I do think, it's just, honestly, it's just mind blowing to me that a Big 12 basketball team only makes 4 field goals in the second half in a game that was right there for them to take. And they just made 4 shots in the second half. It's ugly.
Yeah, no, and look, you brought up a lot of good points. And again, they were shorthanded, but to me, not having Hughley was always going to be tough to try to defend Hunter Dickinson, but he again just like he just did whatever he wanted. He got whatever he wanted. He scored with ease at the rim. I thought Kansas beat them up in the second half on the boards. I mean, I think they had nearly a double-digit rebounding advantage. I think we have found that this is a team that just they don't have a go-to guy. They don't have one guy they don't have to me, they don't have a clear-cut standout best player. They need contributions from everybody that plays to win a game. They need everybody to play well. And outside of like Jalen Moore in the first half and kind of Los, nobody really nobody really played that well. Brody, were you surprised that because I mean we knew Suarez and Hughley weren't going to play.
Mhm.
Porter mentioned it before the game during the availability that Luke Northwetter was going to have to play more minutes. He mentioned Mox as a guy who was maybe going to play some minutes. It looked like that was what was going to happen. He also mentioned Caden Cooper. I think Mox played 5 minutes in the first half, didn't play in the second half. I thought he was fine. He was fine.
Yeah.
He
He
was
did
fine.
what he needed to do.
Yeah.
Nothing great, but nothing bad.
Yeah, he was fine. And I think that you'll take that given that he had only
Yeah.
played in one conference game all year and it was in garbage time against Texas. Were you surprised that Caden Cooper didn't play? I was pretty surprised he didn't get a couple of first half minutes. That surprised me. Did it surprise you?
Not really. And I was one of the ones like, I mean, second Big 12 game, I was clamoring for Caden Cooper to be into the rotation, but I don't know, man. It just seems like, hearing Porter mention Mox multiple times ahead of Caden Cooper, it just kind of felt like, okay, they'll go with Mox because it does make sense in a way that Cooper's not really going to shoot the ball that well, and Mox, he can at least space the floor. Because, I mean, if you're putting in a situation where you have Caden Cooper, Otega Owe, and Sam Godwin on the floor together, it doesn't matter what JV McCollum or Milos Uzan want to do. They're not going to be able to because they'll just help off them. So, I would say not really surprised, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, that was his opportunity.
It's
There
it
was a little bit to it where it's just like, okay, especially when you come out and you see, I'm one that pays attention to the way they're sitting on the bench, and you see Caden Cooper sitting right, like he was one of the first three, looked like he was going to go in, and he just did it.
he didn't have his warm up on
Yeah,
during warm ups. He didn't have like he it was just his jersey and he always has his warm up on. So that made it look like, oh, he's getting into the game tonight. He's
yeah.
getting in. To me, that was my takeaway is like not in a way against him or in a negative way, but if Caden
Mhm.
Cooper doesn't get minutes in that game
Yeah.
where Suarez and Hughley are out and they're struggling, especially in the second half, what the chances of him getting any real minutes the rest of the way are unlikely. That was the game to play in at home,
It was.
shorthanded. That was the game.
There
So
won't be a better opportunity
no,
for him.
there won't. And after losing that game, now we look ahead. I told you I was going to ask you this during the video, and I have my answer and my explanation. But we got 5 games left. Oklahoma's 18-8 overall. They're 6-7 in the conference. They have one of the toughest schedules left in the country over the last 5 games of the regular season. After back-to-back losses, now they're unranked in the AP poll. They're still in the top 40 in the net, but they're unranked in the AP poll. What's your concern level about this team in terms of their NCAA tournament chances? Because right now they're probably still going to be pegged as a 7, 8, 9 seed right now.
Mhm.
What's your concern level about their tournament chances?
I'll go with the 7, maybe 7.5. But and that's just because the way it's kind of looked over the past 2 games. Like I get, like you lose, but the way they lost, just kind of like, I don't know, man. I don't feel comfortable saying they'll go into Stillwater and definitely win that game because Oklahoma State's coming off a win. They had Jamiron Keller who had like 27 points. Maybe they're finding something there with him. I just don't know if Oklahoma can go in there and win that game. That's why I'm at a 7. And I think if they lose that game, I mean, you like highest possible concern, that's where it's at. Like if you're at a 10, and I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing them find 2 more wins if they lose on Saturday.
Look, I agree with you because I'll get my answer right now is a 5, but it's with the caveat that they have to win on Saturday. Have to against Oklahoma State. They get this much needed bye week. They give Suarez time to rest. I think he's more likely to go than Hughley is. But that gives them time to rest. They've been going nonstop since December. I say they're at a 5 because projections still have them decently solid as a tournament team. So 2 years ago, and I've said this before, but 2 years ago, they finished the regular season 18-15. They were 6-10 in conference play. Then
Mhm.
got to the tournament, made a run to the Big 12 or the Big 12 tournament, made a run to the Big 12 tournament championship. They finished the year, or they finished going into the postseason. I think they were 18-16. They were 7-11 in the conference, and they
Yeah.
were among the first 4 out.
Mhm.
So 2 years ago, they finished with 7 conference wins, finished just short. 2 years ago, or last year, they finished with 5 conference wins, and they're not close. Right now,
Mhm.
they're at 6. They are right in the middle. They're right in the middle of those two extremes. And the rest of their schedule, Brody, at Oklahoma State, at Iowa State, who's now number 6 in the AP poll,
And
home against number 2 Houston, home against Cincinnati, at Texas. Those are their 5 games. You win on Saturday, my concern level goes to a 3. Not to say they still can't, because if they lose out and don't win a tournament game, a Big 12 tournament game, then it's still a little bit up in the air. You win on Saturday, I think you're okay. You lose
mhm.
on Saturday? Brody, I don't know. Tell me if this is crazy. Is Saturday arguably the most important game that Porter Moser has had since he's been in Oklahoma? I think it might.
Yes, by far. I
Okay.
mean,
So I'm not crazy.
you can't lose that game Saturday because Iowa State, they're ranked 6th right now, but they play Houston this week. If they win that, I mean, they'll definitely be in the top 5 heading into that game. And everyone knows how hard it is to win Hilton Coliseum. Everyone knows how good Houston is. Texas is hard to win there. Maybe you can beat Cincinnati at home, but I don't think one win with a loss to Oklahoma State, I don't think that's getting you in. And so a loss at Oklahoma State, I think, also would really bring down the morale level, which in turn would also affect the play over those last couple games because you're coming off 2 losses and really that Kansas loss, one of the also kind of more, another loss would be you're going into the bye week off of 2 straight losses. If you could have won that game, you're going into the bye week with good morale. Now you're having bad morale. So yeah, this is definitely the biggest game in Porter Moser's tenure because in years past the team it hasn't been to this level. This is the year they should make the tournament. They should make the tournament, and if you lose that game, those chances they fall way down.
Here's the tough part, Brody. Oklahoma State has been, I mean, arguably the worst team in the Big
Mhm.
12 this year. Now, the worst team in the Big 12 is not a bad team. Oklahoma State is not a horrible team. They're just probably the worst team in the conference, either them or West Virginia. Oklahoma
Yes.
State is 11-14. They're 3-9 in the conference. Do you want to guess when those 3 wins in conference play, when they've come, like how they've happened, what day of the week
Home
and where
games.
they've been?
They were Saturdays
Saturday at
at
home.
home.
Saturday at home. That's their 3 wins. They just beat BYU at home on Saturday, who was in the top 20 when they played them. Beat them pretty good. Beat them by 10. So, and Oklahoma to add, look, every season it's its own thing, but Porter Moser has not beaten Oklahoma State in Stillwater. So, and also you think about a week and a half ago when we had Bedlam at the Lloyd Noble Center, that was a game Oklahoma State could have won. I thought
Oh
Oklahoma
yeah.
was pretty lucky to get out of that game. So while we say it's a must win and maybe the most important for Porter Moser since he's been OU's coach, this isn't a given, man. No,
No.
far from it. Oklahoma State, they play fit. They can't shoot at all, but they're really physical. They play really hard. Their defense is good. What was what stood out to you about the first time these teams played, and what's the overall focus? What's the main focus, especially if OU is shorthanded? What do they got to do on Saturday?
They got to find a way to stop Brandon Garrison because he was a problem in that first game, but he had 21 points on Saturday against BYU. In their win over Kansas State, he also scored in the 20s, and then in their overtime loss to Baylor, which was also a Saturday at home, he also scored in the 20s. So there's a common theme of when Brandon Garrison plays good, Oklahoma State plays good. And Javon Small, he gave the Sooners a ton of problems last time those two teams played. He had 14 last Saturday against BYU. So, to me, the overall focus is they're not a great 3-point shooting team. Don't let them get hot. They made 11 3-pointers, 11 out of 22, 50% against BYU. They got hot. If they do that again, I have a really hard time seeing Oklahoma win the game.
Oklahoma's not winning that game if Oklahoma State shoots
Yeah,
that way. It's not
there's no
happening.
way. And to me, another, like I mentioned, my concern level was a 7. Part of that is because, like, just the way, I don't know if they can win this game, because when you look at it, Oklahoma has everything to lose, and Oklahoma State has nothing at all to lose. Nothing.
They're not making the
So
tournament. They're not making the NCAA
yeah,
tournament.
there's no pressure on Oklahoma State. If you lose, it's another loss. For OU, your tournament chances fall way down. So to me, that's one thing that also had, and again, the fact that Porter Moser he struggles against Oklahoma State big time. This would be the type of game they would lose.
The alarm bells. Now, I think people have had different views of Porter Moser's first 3 years with Oklahoma. The alarm bells will ring louder than they ever have in years. Not just Porter Moser's tenure. If they lose on Saturday, the alarm bells go way off, because now you're right. Now you're facing a last 4 games of the regular season where home against Cincinnati is the most winnable game by it's not even close. And even if you win that game, like, to me, you've got to go into the Big 12 tournament with 20 wins to feel good, to feel solid about your chances of making the NCAA tournament. I think if they win 20 games, they'll be okay. Probably. But this is easily their best chance to get a win. This is easily, I don't know. I'm not trying to overhype this game too much, but I think a lot of dominoes start to fall potentially if they lose this game on Saturday.
A ton of them. A ton of them. And, I think one thing that will help them is I do, if I had to guess right now, I would say that Rivaldo Soares would probably play. I mean, you were there, saw him warm up. I heard he kind of pushed it and then let back a little bit. But the fact that he even did warm up is definitely a positive sign. And this is another part where the bye week just comes in really helpful, because if they played a midweek game this week, I don't know if he'd be able to go. And then now you're feeling a lot better about that, which still you have the concern down low with Hughley maybe probably not playing. So, I'd be surprised if Hughley plays. Just watching him, he was not bending the knee. He was taking a lot longer to stand up than usual. But I don't know, man. It just feels like the type of game that could be just a weird game. And I'm hoping Oklahoma State, all their 3-point shooting, you would hope that they used up all their luck last week when they went 11 for 22, but who knows? They might have more of that in them.
I'm glad you mentioned Rivaldo. I should have mentioned that about Porter called it 50-50 on Saturday. He did go out and warm up before the before the layup lines, like 10 minutes before the game. He was out there. I think Rivaldo's I don't want to speculate too much. I think he's going to go on Saturday. I'd be surprised if Hughley plays. I think Rivaldo will play, and they need him. They need him bad. And to me, and I feel like we've talked about it forever, or like for a while now, but I'm looking at Javian, Ortega, and Los. I'm looking at those 3 guys because, simply put, it hasn't been good enough in conference play. It just hasn't. It hasn't been good enough, man. For Ortega and Javian to be both shooting under 27% from 3, and for all 3 of those guys to be shooting under 40% from the field, it's not good enough. And Jalen Moore has given this team more offense than I think they could have expected. Right? I mean, I don't think they expected Jalen Moore to be a guy that led them in scoring several times in conference play. Need one of those guys to step up. This is a moment, if you're one of those guys, this is a moment where, like, okay, I've struggled, but this is huge. It's a huge opportunity. Oklahoma has the better team. More talent top to bottom. More talent top to bottom. But something about winning in Stillwater, and that crowd is going to be rowdy. It's the last Bedlam probably for the foreseeable future. Crowd's going to be rowdy. Winning on the road is hard. Oklahoma State plays better at home. I don't know, man.
What they're going to have to do is they're going to have to work on some type of zone offense this bye week, because I guarantee you Mike Boynton's going to throw out a zone at him. I don't understand why you wouldn't. I can't remember the last time they successfully beat a zone. And you mentioned, McCollum, Uzan, and Oweh. I think, if they could, one thing they got to make their shots, but if OU could just find a way to get them a few easy looks
I
in the
agree.
game, you got to get them going. And some of that does coaching is some of that, but they also got to make the shots. So if you got to find a way to get at least two of those guys going, because I feel like Jalen Moore has developed a consistent, like he's going to get you 10 to 15. It's kind of what it feels like. And then Rivaldo Soares should help things, but you're going to need one of those guys to also pitch in a good 15, 18 points. So yeah, I think it's gonna be big that they need to get them going. And Sam Godwin, yet again, he can't get into foul trouble. He's been good about not getting into foul trouble the past couple of games. But if he does that, I mean, you're in a rough situation.
Yeah, you're likely relying on Luke Northweather, who, the last couple of games have been pretty tough for him in extended minutes. And that's not, Porter even said it after the game on Saturday that they've got to do a better job of getting him to translate his skills and his practicing on the floor in game time. They do. But also, he's looked a little nervous out there. He looks like he doesn't have a ton of confidence. You don't want to be in a position, this has nothing to do with Luke Northweather. You don't want to be in a position where you not only have to play that dude 20 minutes, but you need him to like do a bunch of stuff while he's on the floor. That's unfair to him, and that's a tough place for the team to be.
Yeah, I think it's tough to rely on any freshman. I
Yeah.
mean, in Oklahoma, they had to do that last year. They were spoiled because those two guys they played well for freshmen. But Northweather, and I agree. I think it's mostly confidence right now because a lot of people want to, talk about his last two games, but he had some good moments against Kansas. The first time they played Oklahoma State, he came in for 10 minutes in the second half and he stepped up and provided, I think, 5 points and a couple assists. He just looked a lot more confident in that game than he looked in the past two. So getting his confidence back, and I think that's just kind of that can be applied to pretty much everyone on the team, apart from Jalen Moore, Rivaldo Soares.
I agree. Look, Saturday, 3:00 in Stillwater. Game's on ESPN2, nationally televised game. We've said a lot of games are must-win games or really big games. Doesn't get any bigger than this. This is the season for Oklahoma. This is potentially the season. It just is. And this is going to be a statement on Porter Moser's tenure in Oklahoma. This is going to be a statement on the players on the roster. This is going to be a statement on the potential momentum of the program moving forward. This is potentially the last Bedlam for quite some time. It doesn't get much bigger than this, man. So with no midweek game, our efforts and attentions turned to that game on Saturday. We'll be back here next week to break down what is either a huge sigh of relief, much needed big win for Oklahoma, or the panic buttons are being sound and there's no way to get around it. We'll be back here next week on In the Paint. Make sure to like and subscribe here at our OU Insider YouTube channel. If you're not a VIP member over at OUinsider.com, make sure to head over there. You're going to get more content, more behind the scenes coverage, more basketball, football, softball, anything you're looking for. We've got it over there. Make sure to head over there. But until then, we'll be back next week on In the Paint.